Obviously, the biggest issue out of round 8 was the application of the laws, as I describe it, as we're very fortunate to have the NRL head of football, Graham Annesley, on the line to talk us through it. G'day, Graham.
Hey, Jimmy, how are you?
Mate, I'm well. More to the point, how are you? This has been a busy couple of days for you. How are you handling that?
Oh, yeah, all good. I mean, obviously these are important issues and there's a lot of passion and emotion around the conversation with these sorts of things. And we have to balance all that with our responsibilities to protect players, and it's just part of our business, but important part of it.
I'd imagine that's the paramount point, and we've talked a lot about that on this program, and that is if the starting point is player safety, then everything flows through from there. Why is it, do you think, that we are, and there's all sorts of theories up there around fatigue and ball in play, etc. Why are we seeing more high tackles during the course of this period than at other times in the game?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can't give you a specific answer. I can't put my finger on it. We are seeing a really significant spike in high tackles this year, just in the opening rounds, and maybe that's just an anomaly, and it will correct itself as the season wears on. But not just with players that are being sent to the sin bin, which of course is the current topic of conversation, but the match review committee, they're reviewing almost double the number of high tackles this year than they were in the first 8 rounds last year. The number of players that have been placed on report and penalised by referees, and of course sin bins, and charges as well. So, those tackles that are reviewed by the match review committee that ultimately result in charges, I mean, they're up significantly as well. So I can't put my finger on why, because the way the game is played this year is not too different to the way it's been played last year. It's not that long ago that we were playing in 2024, not 2025. And, I don't think a lot has changed in the way the clubs or the players are approaching the game. It's just that we've seen this kind of anomaly in the early part of the season.
Was there any directive that came from somewhere in the chain of command, whether it's be above you, below you, that talked about, and it felt like there was a couple missed in round 4, there was application of the laws in round 5, and then again in round 8. Was there any actual directive issued from anyone in the NRL around this?
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to round 4, as you said, there were a couple of high-profile incidents that should have gone to the sin bin that didn't. And as a result of that, I wrote to clubs with the full support of the NRL chief executive to advise clubs and to advise referees that those incidents that were missed in round 4 were not a new standard. That the standard that we put in place over the last 3 years is the existing standard, and we expect that to continue. So that was the only directive, that the standard that has been in place now for several years will continue, and we shouldn't see those incidents as a new standard.
Yeah. Why then the difference from round 7 to round 8? Why was there such a significant difference between those two rounds?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons in that since round 4, I mean, obviously we spend a lot of time, or our referees, coaching staff do spend a lot of time with the referees, trying to adjust to get to land in the right spot, not only on high tackles but on a whole range of issues in our game that the referees have an impact on. And so those levers are pulled a little bit each week to try and land in that right spot. And I think last week there was probably an overreaction. Although I will say, Jimmy, that having reviewed all of the incidents that were sin bin last weekend, there's not too many of them that wouldn't have been sin bins. So we did have an exceptional weekend with a number of incidents, and there was a bit of rain in the weekend as well. So whether that's played any part, I don't know. But there were a couple that perhaps were too harsh, and there were probably a couple that were missed that weren't sin binned as well that could have been.
Yes.
So, but when you look at, we're not going to back away from contact with the head and neck of players, unnecessary forceful contact with the head and neck of players. So that's not going to go away, but we just need the referees to get that balance right between the incidents that do deserve to go to the bin and those that may have mitigation, or perhaps don't reach that bar to turn something from a penalty into a sin bin. We just need to spend more time getting that right, and hopefully we'll see that happen this coming weekend and beyond.
I think a lot of the fans expressed yesterday, listeners on this program, talking about going back in time, going back a number of sets, and that's Andrew Johns was very vocal about that on Sunday. Andrew Abdo spoke last night about a threshold, and the challenge here is, Graham, that the threshold for one senior review official could be different to the threshold for another senior review official. How do you mitigate that?
Well, these things do come down to matters of judgment, and at the end of the day, you can have the best technology in the world. You can have all the camera angles, but slow motion and super slow-mo and everything else, but there's a human looking at that and applying judgment to it. So there's a lot of time spent, and remembering that most of our bunker officials are also our top referees.
Yes.
There's a lot of time spent with them on trying to get a consistent approach to that as well. So we admit that there's been some inconsistencies around this. We're not hiding from that. And so a lot of work is continuing to try and get them all on the same page in relation to that. But yeah, there's no question that's been an issue for us.
Adam G had a hamstring injury last week and did 3 games as a senior review official. We got consistency across those 3 games because it was the same person. I've spoken to you about this previously. Is there the opportunity now to have 2, perhaps 3 senior review experts, and they are the ones and only the ones who would be in the bunker during any game?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're pursuing, Jimmy. We're trying to reduce the number of officials in the bunker. Now, we can't go to one. Not one person couldn't do all 8 games.
No.
And we have to remember that because they are our senior referees, they also we can't give them too many games as well as refereeing because there's a lot of as we can see every week there's a fair amount of kind of emotional stress in these roles, so we have to balance that as well. But yes, it's definitely an objective of us or the NRL to have fewer in there to try and get greater consistency. There's definitely something we're working on. And
then there's the inconsistencies between the referees, Graham, and could that same issue or solution be applied to that? Could we have the best 4 or 5 referees? And I think the people who follow the game, and I watch the game, and I think that referee manages the game, officiates the game better than that referee. Could we have the best 4 or 5 referees doing multiple games over the course of the weekend?
I think that's tougher to achieve, Jimmy, because if we're talking about then those same people being in the bunker as well, it's quite physical to be on the field. I know they're not getting tackled, but there's a lot of physical and emotional stress involved in refereeing 80 minutes of football, and we have to, we also have to develop new referees. The referees that we've got at the moment won't be with us forever, and we have to make sure that we are using some games to, we've got our senior elite referees who tend to referee the big games and representative games and are in contention for origins and finals, but then we've got other referees that will ultimately fill those positions, and we have to be careful about succession as well. So all of those things are factors, and I think it is harder to achieve on the field, but we definitely are trying to achieve that off the field in the bunker.
Mm. Okay, one of the potential outcomes of not going back, as has been signalled by Andrew Abdo, not going back as much, is that players know that and then are instructed to stay down until they get the result that they're looking for. And that's potentially something that we might see in round 9 of Magic Round. Could there be a laws brought in that if a player does stay down, if there is a player that is hit in the head, that they must leave the field for a head injury assessment? That's another thing that the listeners say, well, if it's about player safety, why is that player who has been hit with moderate force not off the field and undergoing an HIA?
Well, I think all those things are on the table. Not necessarily right now, because we're always, the Commission's reluctant to make rule changes mid-season and play the competition under one set of rules for part of the season and a different set of rules for the remainder of the season. But they have some validity, and I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand as not something worthy of consideration. But with all of these changes, we have to think about not only the intent of the change, but the unintended consequences that can arise. And back to your point about players lying down, if in fact hoping to get the bunker to intervene on something where the play has continued. It's a pretty risky ploy from a coach, I would have thought, to have one of your players out of the defensive line in the hope that the bunker might go back and send someone to the sin bin for that tackle. It's a pretty risky ploy for them to undertake. But it's not only a matter of whether a player gets injured or not. What the official in the bunker has to look at is what actually happened in that tackle. So, they're going to be looking for the more serious types of incidents. And what Andrew was signalling yesterday is that we don't want to be going back and putting players in the bin and stopping play for, what might be called borderline cases or incidents where they might be better left to the match review committee.
Yep.
But where there is a serious incident and the referee in the bunker or the bunker official has the evidence based on the replays to say it's a serious incident, whether a player is injured or not, they're the ones that we want to restrict it to, not those borderline or arguable instances.
Mm. In the instance of identifying more incidents like that, does a second set of eyes, does a second referee help in this situation?
Probably not, because these incidents tend to happen to players that are either on the ball or have just released the ball. And so, that's really the responsibility of the referee. The bunker's there as a second set of eyes. And of course, the bunker has the ability to look at multiple camera angles, which an second on-field official doesn't. So I think the bunker is the right place. We just have to get the balance right. Yeah. I don't think anyone, certainly we don't expect, and I'm sure most people who are reasonable don't expect players who have committed a serious offence to stay on the field. And there needs to be action taken against those players. But we don't want to be overreacting and taking players off the field who have not committed serious offences, particularly if the play has gone on and it hasn't been picked up by the referee live.
Mm. We've talked a lot today about the responsibility of the referees and the bunker and their response. Andrew spoke a lot about the responsibility of the players and the coaches. Some teams, it is clear, the data shows are more penalised than others for high tackles. What do you think, what would you say is the role of those stakeholders, the players and the coaches, in solving this issue for the game, Graham?
Well, everyone's got a responsibility, Jimmy. I mean, we've got a responsibility in terms of how we use the laws of the game and our judiciary and match review processes to try to disincentivise these types of tackles. But the players and the coaches have also got a role. In fact, it's interesting, Jimmy, that some clubs have very few instances of players going to the bin and are penalised far less often than other clubs in relation to high tackles. The same with sin bins and the same with charges by the match review committee.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an area of technique and discipline that is involved, and that's something that we can't control as the NRL. We can put the disincentives in place or the penalties that are in place if you don't abide by the laws. But if clubs and coaches want to avoid those sorts of errors that are being created in games, then that they have a role to play in that. So everyone has a role, and we don't want to be taking players off the field. We don't want to be penalising players, and we certainly don't want to see players being hit in the head because you should be able to play the game without the risk of that happening. Certainly without any serious risk of it happening anyway.
You're a referee for 15 years. Can you speak of, with your experience, Graham, about the challenges you faced as a referee? And we hear it a lot with players, right? Oh, the speed of the game and the effect on the impact on the athlete, etc. Can you talk about what it would be like, given your closeness to it now and your experience previously, about the increase in the challenge for the referees this day and age compared to your day and age?
Well, it's not easy. It's a difficult job. It was a difficult job then. It's probably a more difficult job now. When I say difficult, it's probably more because of the scrutiny and the the quality of television replays or video replays. It's not that long ago, going back to the 90s and so forth, where before the introduction of subscription television, before Foxtel came onto the scene, that there was only 2 games a week that were covered by free-to-air television. The rest had a single camera coverage just for judiciary purposes, and that was usually a wide shot where you didn't get any sort of detail in replays whatsoever. Now we've got 12 to 15 cameras, and if you go to Origin and finals and so forth, almost double that.
Yep.
In high definition, where everything used to be in standard definition, which is much grainier and more difficult to see detail, we've got high definition now and 4K and super slow-mos, where you can see every single impact in great detail from multiple camera angles. So that brings with it a whole new level of pressure on people. Now, if you think about bunker officials, there is also a pressure on them to respond quickly.
Yes.
No one wants to see our game stop and held up for a decision. So they're under pressure. They've got multiple camera angles to choose from, and they're under pressure to make a decision in a reasonably quick period of time. And of course, referees are responding instantly. So, and then once they do respond, there are all these multiple camera angles that can be shown to either prove them right or wrong. Yeah. So that brings with it a whole different level of pressure, and that's probably the major change.
No, I think you're exactly right. By the way, your Wikipedia page says that you were credited with the introduction of the video replay. So your fingerprints are all over this, Graham.
Well, I mean, it was always going to happen. It was only a matter of when. I've been suffering for it ever since.
All right, I want to overlay all that we've talked about and the up in arms from yesterday and, hey, calm down and this is what we're at the heart. And then overlay that with the code is looking to sign the biggest TV deal in its history, and how important it is that we have a game that is so attractive to the viewers that the TV numbers, which have been great, and the live numbers are fantastic and record levels, but that continues when the broadcast negotiations are about to start. Tell me about those conversations that are had internally, Graham.
Well, those conversations aren't had operationally at our level. Our responsibility is to try and make sure that we get as much right on the field as possible and to make sure that we're as consistent as possible. So none of this in terms of any adjustments we might be making to, particularly for example, when the bunker comes in on incidents that have been missed in live play. None of those discussions, the issue of broadcast and contracts never comes into those discussions, because we've got a more immediate responsibility, which is the fans and the clubs, to provide them with the best quality officiating that we can and the most consistent officiating that we can. So the rest of it is a consequence of having a game that's in good health. And I have to say, Jimmy, that the game is in great shape. I mean, you only had to watch that Tigers game the other day, and it was just sensational. And, despite all the furore about incidents that might take place in games, the reason that these things generate so much controversy is that people are so passionate and so invested in the game. And, may that continue forever, because that's why the responsibility as administrators to try and make it as fair and even and acceptable to our fans who pay their money to come and watch games as possible. And we know that at times we let them down on that, but it's not through lack of trying, and we'll continue to try and make sure that we deliver on that as much as we possibly can.
You'll get no argument from me on that, Graham. Absolutely. All right, we've got Women's State of Origin on Thursday night and then 8 matches for Magic Round. Ideally, for you, what does Magic Round look like, Graham?
A whole weekend, starting from Thursday night with the Women's Origin game, but a whole weekend of absolutely unbelievable football, a great event in Brisbane with fans from right around the country flocking to Brisbane, turning Brisbane into a complete rugby league festival, and 8 games where we're talking about the football and not the officials. It's never our objective for people to be talking about the officials. We have to at times because of the decisions they make, rightly or wrongly. Mostly right, I might add. There's only the controversial ones that we finish up talking about. But we don't want to be talking about that. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of officiating and incidents that will take place on the field. But what I'm hoping for is that when we finish Magic Round, when we wrap up with the last game on Sunday, that everyone says what an unbelievable event that was.
Yeah. I said it yesterday, and as someone who's got a son who's junior refereeing at the moment, it starts with a love of the game, and I think that's true for all officials, and you've enunciated that very clearly. Graham, great to have you on the program. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Graham Annesley there, the NRL head of football. Thanks for watching. For more great content, subscribe to SEN League, your home of the greatest game of all.